What makes you think you belong here, Grandpa? The question dripped with mockery, slicing through the steady drone of jet engines like a knife through silk. It was the kind of insult that carried weight, delivered by someone who'd never tasted real failure. Benjamin Carter didn't react. He remained motionless, eyes locked on the machine resting before him on the Nevada tarmac. An AH-64E Apache Guardian, black as midnight, reflecting the brutal desert sun. Most people saw cutting-edge technology. Benjamin saw memory incarnate, a steel companion from another lifetime. His faded denim jacket, worn thin by countless washes, and his plain utility pants identified him clearly. He was groundskeeping crew, a man who mowed grass along taxiways and maintained the edges of the base. His weathered hands, scarred and calloused from decades of small labors, hung relaxed at his sides. "I'm talking to you." The voice grew louder. Benjamin pivoted deliberately. Standing before him was his polar opposite. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens, barely past his 35th birthday, possessed a jawline that seemed forged from iron, and eyes radiating absolute confidence, rooted in rank alone. His flight suit was immaculate, every badge gleaming like polished glass. Behind him stood a cluster of junior aviators, grinning like pack animals watching their alpha establish dominance. Benjamin's gaze, calm and unwavering as frozen lake water, met the lieutenant colonel's stare directly. No trace of intimidation, no flicker of resentment, only profound stillness that somehow amplified Stevens's irritation. "No, sir," Benjamin replied, his voice gravelly and measured. "I'm exactly where I need to be," Stevens sneered. "Really? You're standing here admiring military equipment like you own the place. This is off limits to civilians. This helicopter," he slapped the composite armor loudly, "costs more than everything you've earned in your entire sad little life combined. So do us all a favor and shuffle back to your weed whacker before you contaminate something important." Laughter erupted from the younger pilots. Cruel, effortless laughter. Benjamin's attention drifted back toward the Apache. He noticed the targeting system mounted beneath the nose, the weapon pylons waiting for ordnance. But beyond the machinery, he saw something deeper. Phantoms. Voices of brothers long gone, choking sandstorms in distant war zones. Green tracer fire arcing upward through ink-black skies. The sharp aroma of turbine fuel and hydraulic fluid transported him instantly across decades. "She's an incredible machine," Benjamin murmured, almost to himself. Stevens heard it. He interpreted it as defiance, an elderly nobody daring to express judgment on matters far beyond his comprehension. "Oh, incredible, is she?" Stevens mocked, stepping aggressively into Benjamin's personal space, forcing eye contact. "And what exactly would you know about it? Did you fly crop dusters during the Great Depression?" More cruel laughter echoed across the flight line. Benjamin said nothing. His serene composure stood in stark contrast to Stevens's agitation. This refusal to submit was incomprehensible to the lieutenant colonel, who expected instant obedience. The old man's quiet strength felt like deliberate provocation. Stevens decided to escalate, to humiliate this fossil publicly. "You know what?" Stevens announced loudly, playing to his audience. "Since you love this bird so much, why don't you take her up? Go ahead, show everyone your expertise. Climb in, old-timer. Let's see what you've got." The suggestion was so ludicrous that laughter became uncontrollable among the assembled pilots. The mental image of this bent, elderly maintenance worker, someone who appeared barely capable of climbing stairs, attempting to operate billions of dollars worth of advanced aerospace engineering, was absurdly hilarious. They anticipated humiliation, a shuffling retreat filled with embarrassment and mumbled apologies, the old man scurrying back to his lawnmowers and leaf blowers where he belonged. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens folded his arms across his chest, smug satisfaction radiating from every pore. Victory achieved. Authority reasserted. But Benjamin didn't retreat. He didn't avert his gaze. Instead, something dormant ignited deep within his clear blue eyes. He looked beyond the sneering officer toward the silent, waiting helicopter. He remembered a vow made to a dying comrade inside a blood-soaked cockpit halfway around the world. A promise never to forget the feeling, never to let the fire die completely. In that instant, decades melted away. His posture straightened subtly, but the change was unmistakable. He looked directly at Lieutenant Colonel Stevens, the man who viewed him as nothing more than a punchline, and spoke two simple words. "Sounds good." The laughter ceased instantly, severed like a cut wire. Stunned silence blanketed the airfield. The pilots stared, frozen grins transforming into uncertain confusion. Stevens's smirk collapsed. This wasn't following the expected script. He'd issued an impossible, sarcastic challenge, and the old man had accepted it without hesitation. For several heartbeats, Stevens stood speechless. He felt his subordinates watching. Backing down now would obliterate his credibility. Anger and disbelief churned in his gut. He was the commanding officer. He controlled this situation. He would follow through. "You're actually serious?" Stevens stammered, nervousness creeping into his tone. "You think this is some kind of joke?" Benjamin's expression remained unchanged. "You issued an order, Lieutenant Colonel." The formal use of rank was a subtle, razor-sharp reminder. Stevens's face flushed crimson, trapped by his own arrogance. "Fine," he snapped, turning toward the bewildered crew chief observing the spectacle. "Chief, get this man a helmet and prepare this aircraft for immediate flight." The crew chief, a veteran with 2 decades of service, looked from the officer to the elderly man and back again, disbelief written across his face. "Sir, with respect, are you certain? Regulations require proper authorization. We can't simply allow a civilian to—" "Are you questioning my direct order, Chief?" Stevens barked, reasserting dominance through volume alone. The crew chief's jaw tightened, but he recognized a losing argument. "No, sir." He turned and headed toward the equipment locker, shaking his head. This was professional suicide for the lieutenant colonel, and he was being made complicit. Benjamin walked toward the Apache, each step measured and purposeful. Every footfall against concrete felt deliberate. As proximity closed, sensory details intensified, pulling him backward through time. The unmistakable scent of JP-8 aviation fuel, acrid and strangely comforting. The low electronic hum of the auxiliary power unit already operational. Heat waves shimmering off the black fuselage. He reached the cockpit and placed one hand flat against the cool metal skin. He closed his eyes. Suddenly, Nevada disappeared. He stood in Afghanistan's Korangal Valley, the Valley of Death, air thin and saturated with fine dust. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump of rotor blades creating a frantic pulse against terrifying silence between engagements. He was 27 years old, call sign Phantom, flying a different aircraft, an older Cobra, but the essence remained identical. Below, a surrounded infantry unit faced imminent annihilation. Their desperate radio transmissions filled his headset, screams punctuated by staccato enemy gunfire. His co-pilot, a young man named Rodriguez, barely 23 years old, was identifying threats. "Phantom, 2 o'clock high, Ridgeline, RPG team." The memory was visceral. He felt the jolt as he yanked the cyclic sideways, the helicopter protesting under extreme maneuvering stress. He tasted metallic fear coating his mouth. He remembered unleashing rocket salvos, the satisfying whoosh as they departed, fireballs blossoming across distant terrain. He remembered Rodriguez's victorious shout, abruptly silenced by the horrific thwack of heavy rounds piercing the canopy, followed by impossible, crushing silence on the internal comms. The memory always ended there. His eyes opened. The crew chief stood beside him, extending a helmet. Benjamin accepted it, his hand rock steady. The name tape on the chief's uniform read Rodriguez. Common enough name, yet the coincidence sent ice down his spine. He was no longer that young warrior, but the promise made to the dying boy beside him resonated through his soul. "I'll never forget how to make her sing for you, kid. Never." He donned the helmet. It felt natural, correct? The ground crew, moving with reluctant professionalism, secured him into the pilot's station. To them, this was farce, dangerous stupidity ordered by an arrogant superior. But as Benjamin's hands moved across the console, something shifted fundamentally. There was zero hesitation. His gnarled fingers, which moments earlier appeared clumsy, now moved with eerie, instinctive precision. They flowed across switches, buttons, and multifunction displays. He didn't need to search. He knew every location. It was a language his body remembered perfectly. Switch, press, toggle, tap. The pre-flight checklist, a complex procedure requiring most pilots 10 minutes with written guidance, was completed in under 2. The crew chief watched through the canopy, his jaw dropping slowly. He'd never witnessed anyone, not even the most experienced instructors, move with such fluid certainty. This wasn't merely practiced skill. This was muscle memory, instinct, like watching a master pianist reunite with a Stradivarius after years apart. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens stood back, arms crossed, his anger now blending with creeping unease. This wasn't unfolding as anticipated. The old man wasn't fumbling. He wasn't appearing confused. He looked completely at home. Inside the cockpit, Benjamin felt the twin turbines spool up, vibrations coursing through the airframe and into his skeleton. It was a sensation he'd missed beyond description. He signaled thumbs up to the ground crew. The chief, now visibly shaken, returned a hesitant acknowledgement. With final verification, Benjamin smoothly raised the collective. The massive rotor system bit into air, and 7 tons of war machine lifted off concrete. No wobble, no drift, zero indication of amateur handling. The Apache rose 5 feet, held perfect hover for 1 motionless second, then ascended vertically with power that pressed Benjamin firmly into his seat. The assembled crowd stared upward, mouths open. They'd expected comedy, clumsy catastrophe. What they witnessed was absolute mastery. Once clear of the flight line, Benjamin didn't simply fly. He performed. He executed maneuvers reserved for air show legends and combat pilot folklore. He rolled into a flawless wing-over, a climbing, banking rotation that bled energy at its peak before diving earthward. He transitioned into a hammerhead stall, pushing the helicopter into vertical climb until forward speed died completely, hovering impossibly for 1 breathtaking moment before pivoting on its axis and plummeting back toward ground, pulling out at the final conceivable instant. The pilots on the tarmac were speechless. These weren't mere showboating tricks. They were combat techniques flown with aggression and precision that defied comprehension. He made the Apache dance. He made it pirouette and glide, dive and soar. It was violent, graceful ballet painted across the sky. "Who in God's name is that?" one young pilot whispered. Earlier mockery evaporated, replaced by pure awe. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens was no longer smirking. His face had drained to chalk white. He was a competent aviator himself, but he recognized with gut-wrenching certainty that he couldn't replicate what he was witnessing. Nobody he knew could. A young airman named Ellis, sharp and observant, watching from a nearby hangar bay, understood the sheer impossibility unfolding. This wasn't luck. This was something extraordinary. Acting on instinct, he grabbed a service line and called directly to the base commander's office. Stammering, he managed, "Sir, you need to reach the primary flight line immediately. Hangar 4. Something unbelievable is happening with the new Apache." Just as Benjamin guided the helicopter into a low, high-velocity pass down the runway, a black sedan bearing a 4-star pennant screeched to a halt beside the tarmac. The rear door flew open and out stepped General Rodriguez, the installation commander. He was late 60s, his face a topographical map of 40 years of conflict. Known for unshakable composure, today his expression was a thunderstorm of fury. He'd received frantic reports about a civilian operating his most advanced asset, and had arrived to personally destroy the officer responsible. He strode onto the tarmac, scanning for the incompetent fool who'd permitted this nightmare. His gaze landed on the pale, perspiring Lieutenant Colonel Stevens. But before he could unleash the verbal barrage building in his chest, he heard the Apache's distinctive rotor signature and looked skyward. He froze mid-stride. His rage evaporated, replaced by stunned, absolute disbelief. He watched the helicopter complete its pass, execute a tight, spiraling ascent, then circle for landing approach. He wasn't merely observing the machine. He was observing the way it was being flown, the signature style, the aggressive yet impossibly smooth transitions. He'd only ever witnessed one person fly like that, a ghost from his past. "It can't be," the general whispered, emotion thickening his voice. Benjamin brought the Apache back to its precise original position. The landing was flawless, skids touching concrete with the delicacy of falling snow. He executed the shutdown sequence with identical practiced efficiency, the turbine whine gradually fading to silence. The canopy opened. For several moments, he simply sat, breathing the lingering cockpit scent, feeling the quiet electronic hum. He felt more alive than he had in 3 decades. He unstrapped and climbed out, movements slightly stiff now that adrenaline was receding. He looked old again. As his boots contacted ground, he saw General Rodriguez striding toward him, completely ignoring Lieutenant Colonel Stevens. The general, a 4-star commander of one of the nation's most critical installations, halted 3 feet before the elderly groundskeeper in the threadbare jacket. He drew himself to full height, spine perfectly straight, and rendered the sharpest, most respectful salute Benjamin had ever received. "Phantom," General Rodriguez said, his voice cracking slightly. "It's an honor, sir." "Far too long." Benjamin studied the general's face, recognizing the familiar lines around his eyes, and a slow smile spread across his own weathered features. He raised his hand and returned the salute, slightly slower, slightly less crisp, but carrying equal meaning. "Good to see you too, Rodriguez," he said quietly. "You've come a long way, kid." The general dropped his salute, a wide grin breaking across his weathered face. He wheeled toward the utterly bewildered and terrified Lieutenant Colonel Stevens, his expression instantly hardening back into cold fury. "Lieutenant Colonel," he began, his voice dangerously low, "do you have any comprehension of who this individual is? Do you possess even the faintest understanding of the magnitude of your stupidity?" Stevens could only stammer. "Sir, he's a groundskeeper. It was a joke, sir. Just a joke." General Rodriguez's voice exploded into a roar that echoed across the entire installation. "You see a groundskeeper? I see Chief Warrant Officer 5 Benjamin Phantom Carter, the single most decorated rotary wing combat pilot in the history of this nation's military. This man authored the definitive manual on Apache combat doctrine. The textbook you studied in flight school, he wrote half of it. The maneuvers they told you were physically impossible, he invented them. He has accumulated over 13,000 flight hours, 8,000 of those in active combat zones. He flew operations that remain so highly classified that discussing them requires security clearances you will never possess. The man you just called Grandpa single-handedly extracted an entire Ranger squad from the Korengal Valley. Piloting an aircraft so catastrophically damaged, it defied basic physics to remain airborne. A mission, I might add, where I served as his co-pilot. He jabbed a finger toward his own chest. "The man you humiliated is a living legend." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every pilot, every member of the ground crew stared at Benjamin with newfound, profound reverence. A hero, a legend, standing before them in worn work clothes, and they had ridiculed him. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens appeared as though the earth had been ripped from beneath his feet. His entire worldview, constructed on rank and appearance and rigid protocol, had just shattered completely. He looked at Benjamin, truly looked at him for the first time, and saw not an elderly man, but the quiet, unshakable strength radiating from his eyes. The crushing weight of his own arrogance collapsed upon him, and he felt shame so profound it was physically nauseating. He stumbled forward, his authority forgotten. "Sir," he said to Benjamin, his voice choking. "Sir, I cannot. There are no words. I am profoundly sorry." Benjamin looked at the broken man before him. He took no satisfaction in the lieutenant colonel's humiliation. No anger remained in him, only quiet sadness for a young man with so much yet to learn. He placed a gentle hand on Stevens's shoulder. "The uniform doesn't create the soldier, son," Benjamin said softly. "And the decorations don't create the hero. It's what you do when nobody's watching that defines you. It's the heart. Remember that." Later that day, Lieutenant Colonel Stevens quietly and formally submitted his resignation. The story of the elderly groundskeeper who made an Apache dance spread like wildfire, becoming permanent installation mythology. Benjamin Carter returned to his job, but everything had changed. Pilots stopped to speak with him, seeking his quiet wisdom. Young airmen saluted him as he passed. He was no longer invisible. He was phantom, a hero hidden in plain sight, a living reminder that the greatest among us are often those who seek no recognition whatsoever. What we witnessed on that flight line transcended simply the humiliation of an arrogant man. It was a powerful lesson we all desperately need to remember. True strength isn't loud. It's quiet. True honor isn't displayed on a sleeve. It's carried within the soul. We inhabit a world so quick to judge based on appearances, on superficial indicators of success and status. We forget to look deeper, to recognize the history and experience etched into the faces of our elders. The next time you encounter someone you might be tempted to dismiss, an elderly man in a worn jacket, a quiet woman at the back of the room, take a moment. Look closer. You might just be in the presence of a hero. You might be standing beside a legend, and you would never know unless you choose to see with respect and listen with humility. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Unfold Tales for more stories that remind us of the hidden heroes who walk among us every single day.